whataboutism, a conversational tactic in which a person responds to an argument or attack by changing the subject to focus on someone else's misconduct, implying that all criticism is invalid because no one is completely blameless. Now, the reason why I decided to make this video is because whataboutism seems to be a very, very rising issue nowadays, especially. And it is funny because I did a little bit of research in the word of whataboutism in this term. Thought, where did it originate? Why did it originate? When was it the most popular? Well, apparently, the truth of that, the answer to that question is quite interesting. Whataboutism, apparently, is a Cold War propaganda tactic the Soviet Union started using in the 1940s to deflect unwanted criticisms and accusations. Instead of addressing concerns or answering uncomfortable questions, Soviet leaders would start replying with, "What about this? What about that?" and then mentioning unfavorable events in the US and other parts of the Western world. Now, what exactly is whataboutism? I mean, I've already read two different definitions, but down to earth, what exactly is it? Well, whataboutism is a fallacy. It's a conversational tactic. It's deviation. It's basically a cheap tactic that is used so that you don't have to answer anything uncomfortable. Because we all know that politicians don't always want to answer questions. They have some things they can't really answer. I mean, they can, they know the answer, but they're gonna get ruined for it. And the same works for, normal people, for people who just go to speaker's corner or who just debate with each other or who give their opinions. When a person sees that they don't really have enough points to defend their standpoint, they will resort to whataboutism, to try to blame somebody else of doing something remotely similar, even if the situation is completely different. For example, the best example I could ever give is right here, is Ukraine, in this very moment, which is the very reason why I started to make this video. Now, Ukraine, the Ukrainian situation, there needs to be a bit of research for people to truly understand it well enough. But the war in Ukraine has been clearly and obviously started by Russia. The West didn't declare war on Russia. The West didn't make Russia invade Ukraine. Ukraine didn't even try to be part of NATO. Whoever says that is completely wrong. The only time that Ukraine actually started considering joining NATO is just basically days ago, when way after Russia started their large-scale invasion. But anyway, where is the whataboutism there? Well, the pro-Russian apologists, or as I like to call them, the based Russia apologists, like to show examples of wars waged by the US or by other countries in Europe, and from that they say, they waged these wars, and thus you can't take refuge with them. You can't get help from the US, from the UK, from the West, because the West did bad things in the past. Ooh. Now, I don't deny that there had been some less than favorable things done by the West, by the Western nations, by the US, by the UK, but the truth of the matter is, that's not what we're discussing. We are discussing the war that's being waged in Ukraine. And the West hasn't really done all that much to Russia to provoke this war. Yes, the West accepted new NATO members because, simply put, the countries that wanted to join NATO, that were in the Russian sphere of influence, simply didn't really want to be in the Russian sphere of influence to begin with. And considering the brutal expansion tactics that Russia has had and their basically inexistent foreign policy of you do how I say, or we invade you, or we threaten nukes, or we cut off the gas, you can see that those countries might have felt a little bit more comfortable joining the West. Now, of course, I will do more videos about that later, but the point of the matter is, and just so we stay, focused on the point that we're discussing today, whataboutism is not an argument. Whataboutism, again, is simply a deviation from the actual point that's being discussed. Just because you give an example of a war that somebody else has waged that has not been a particularly favorable piece of PR for that specific country who waged it, doesn't mean that that country who waged that war cannot be right in a different situation. As the saying goes, even a broken clock is right twice a day. Now, this sword cuts both ways, of course. Sometimes Russia is correct about things they say about the West. But in this situation, to be using the fallacy of whataboutism to defend Russia is simply ridiculous. Thank you very much for watching this video. Like and subscribe if you like it, and I will be continuing more videos discussing the situation in Ukraine. See ya.